One thing's for certain. Live-action anime films seem to get a bad rap these days, mostly failing to attract mainstream audiences by either doing characters such a disservice or trying way too hard to be like their hand-drawn animated or manga-based predecessors. 2017's Ghost in the Shell tried to follow that exact same theme of what it means to be human, just like Mamoru Oshii's original, and while it did try to incorporate iconic moments from the original, it felt more like style over substance rather than making a well-written story and complex themes of its own. Same applies to other films of the genre, like Speed Racer, and most notoriously, Dragon Ball Evolution, which gave us the acting cancer of Justin Chatwin. However, there is still hope that there is a good live-action anime film, the same way that there will be a good live-action video game film. It's definitely beyond the horizon, but maybe it could possibly change our minds with the latest live-action anime adaptation of the manga/TV series, Alita Battle Angel. Now, at first, the film was supposed to be directed by James Cameron, who did the first two Terminator films, Aliens, and Titanic, and he really wanted to direct a live-action adaptation of Alita Battle Angel since he fell in love with the source material thanks to a recommendation of Guillermo del Toro of all people. But since he felt way too focused on creating Avatar and its oncoming unnecessary sequels, Robert Rodriguez, who is also a good friend of James Cameron, took on the job as being the director. The question is whether this live adaptation can appeal to mainstream moviegoers, or most of all, be a good film on its own right. In the 26th century, in the rusty world of Iron City, Christoph Waltz, as Dr. Dyson Ito, uncovers a dismantled cyborg with a still-functioning brain and connects it with a robotic body and names her Alita after his late daughter. Rosa Salazar, who plays the main lead Alita, has no exact recollection of her past, but then soon discovers that she has unstoppable fighting abilities like no other. Seriously, she has the fighting abilities that will put Ronda Rousey in shame. But then again, so did Holly Holm, so yeah. Throughout her life in Iron City, she eventually develops a romance with a teenage tech junkie named Hugo, played by Kenan Johnson. However, she also attracts the attention of cyborg bounty hunters, one of them being played by Ed Skrein, and Mahershala Ali as Vector, an entrepreneur of the very popular game Motorball, who sees Alita as a very dangerous threat. So Alita has to figure out what her past is, who she is as a person, fight for her life against oncoming attackers, and to find out what's really going on behind the scenes. Now let me say this right now. I am not the biggest fanboy in the room when it comes to anime. Occasionally I watch a few movies and a few episodes of a TV series here and there, but in all honesty, I never really felt invested in the genre, sorry. But that doesn't necessarily mean that I won't give it a chance. I mean, heck, comedy and horror are my least favorite genre. But you know what? For every Brothers Grimsby, there will be a Monty Python and the Holy Grail, or Superbad. And for every horror movie like Slender Man or Ouija, there will always be The Descent or Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So generally, I do think it's okay to see a movie of a genre that you don't particularly care about and give it a shot. So after witnessing what I watched in Alita Battle Angel, I can definitely tell you guys that this movie is just average. As a live-action anime film, it is a far improvement from most live-action anime films, but as a movie, I would have to categorize it as being underwhelming and just plain forgettable. But hear me out when I say this. On a visual and world-building standpoint, this movie is stunning. If you are a future filmmaker out there who really wants to make a science fiction film, and if you want to make your science fiction world believable to the viewer, look no further than James Cameron. As done with Avatar and his other movies like Terminator and Aliens, James Cameron is the go-to guy in establishing a setting that the viewer can get lost in. The overall scope of Iron City is dirty and grainy, but in a very good sense, and the overall landscape and the buildings, it really reminded me a bit close to Elysium, with the houses being stacked on top of each other, giving it that very grainy, post-apocalyptic kind of vibe. And while there is a lot of green screen involved, the film does utilize a bit of use of practical effects. And that's not to go without saying that the visual effects are marvelous. Along with the visual effect and scope of Iron City, I also like the visual effect and scope of the upper city, known as Zalem. It does indeed look incredibly creative, and I also like the design of the cyborg bounty hunters. The design of them looks pretty cool and something that we really haven't even seen in a whole lot of sci-fi movies that involve cyborgs and robots. And I also love the visual technique of the filmmakers, I think, putting a motion capture suit on the actor with only their face remaining without having to use any kind of dots for it, making it look like the actor's face is a part of that robotic design. The acting for the most part is very good, especially from two key highlights. Rosa Salazar does an excellent job at selling the performance as Alita, embodying the naiveness and humanity into a role that we haven't even seen in live-action anime films. While her character does have an inkling of some anime cliches like, I'm a character who just woke up and just can't remember my past, and being a cute innocent girl who at one point is holding a stuffed animal while on top of her bed, when in actuality is a killing machine who can defeat anyone in her path, she's very fierce and determined, and she is deeply likable. I also think that Christoph Waltz does a very impressive job as Dr. Dyson Ito, and sadly enough, I wish he was featured more in this movie prominently, because even though the scenes with him and Alita and how they bond as a father and somewhat daughter show what could be a far better movie, the problem is that there isn't much to it. The problem is that there isn't much of it. Eventually, Ito gets shoved to the sidelines and becomes a side character, and the film removes itself of any kind of emotional weight or nuance afterwards. But I do have to say that the action scenes are visceral, and to be perfectly honest, they're pretty freaking awesome. Why that is because despite of it being a PG-13 movie, this film is violent beyond repair. There's bodies flying, people getting cut in half, cyborgs getting crushed, smashed, decapitated, squished, and ripped apart with little blue blood pouring out of them. And for as talented as a filmmaker he is, Robert Rodriguez really does have a thing with action set pieces, and his biggest example lies within the motorball fight. The big climatic action scene alone when it comes to the motorball race is probably the main selling highlight point of the film, since it was also kind of a highlight of the manga. And based upon the overall staging, the deaths in this movie, and the overall sequences that occur, how it is choreographed and how it ends results in an incredibly satisfying action scene. And believe me when I say that most of the action scenes in this movie also offer up their fair share of merciless, badass violence. But unfortunately, that's when all the positives end, and we have to delve into the negatives I have with this film. And trust me, the eyes on Alita are the least of the film's issues. I think the biggest complaint I can say when it comes to Alita Battle Angel is that the film feels like it's being made by two different people who don't converge in the middle. James Cameron has a wonderful sense of visual effects and world building, and Robert Rodriguez has an outstanding eye for action sequences. However, it seems that somewhere in the middle, they really couldn't find or create an interesting and powerful story. The story feels like something that we have always seen from every classic hero's journey film, or a character trying to remember their past kind of film, and it just becomes incredibly superficial and underwhelming when you see the final product. Worse still, some of the characters are just kind of dull, and their development just goes completely off the rails. You know how I mentioned that Alita later on develops a romance with Hugo? Well, the thing is that after the first half of the movie, the romance becomes the central narrative, and I couldn't bring myself to care about the relationship. Mostly because Kenan Johnson's performance lacks any kind of charm, charisma, or even chemistry with Salazar, then it makes the movie's plot feel all the more cumbersome. Not to mention that their dialogue is cheesy beyond repair. Another thing is that the villains are incredibly weak. Mahershala Ali doesn't really stand out at all, mostly because his performance is very lacking in any kind of life to it, as well as him not giving any kind of material to work with other than just being a generic bad guy. Jackie Earle Haley comes up as a surprise role as one of the main antagonists, but again, all his character amounts to is to ultimately be another generic angry bad guy for Alita to defeat. And while it's nice to see Jennifer Connelly as one of the film's antagonists, while she does carry a huge significance to her character in the film, her character still isn't really anything to write home about. But perhaps my biggest and final complaint of this movie is that the movie's ending is horrible sequel bait. The reason why I say is that by the time it ends, this entire movie feels like Act 1. Yes, it's another one of those endings that really doesn't want to end on a high note. It doesn't want to keep fans wanting more. It really ends on a sequel-baited fashion just to install more franchises because, you know, based upon its budget of $200 million, that's definitely gonna happen, right? And not only that, but when it ends, it also kind of leaves things unanswered or unsolved. I wonder what really happened to that character. Tough luck, you're gonna have to wait for the sequel. I wonder what the technologically advanced city of Zalem looks like. I'm sorry, you're gonna have to wait for the sequel. Overall, guys, Alita Battle Angel, while it's not a terribly bad movie, it is a disappointingly forgettable one. Yes, the visual effects are a marvel to behold. The world building is very pleasing and creative. The acting for the most part is very good, and the action sequences kick so much ass. But what really brings this movie down is an incredibly flat story, dull characters, character development going completely off the rail, poor character development, incredibly weak villains, and a superfluous sequel-baited ending that makes any attempts of making a franchise become completely out of reach. I know there are people out there who are really gonna like this movie, but ultimately for me, it comes down to the fact that this movie is just a mediocre mess, and I have to give Alita: Battle Angel a 2.5 out of 5. Alright guys, so that is my review of Alita: Battle Angel. Comment below, let me know what you thought about the movie. Find me on Facebook, Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, and also Xbox if you're in the video gaming mood. And also, if you would like to see more reviews like this, be sure to subscribe for more. My name is Luke Nukem, and you, my friends, have been blown away.